Welcome to the Addition Financial webinar, What's Your Aging in Place Plan? Our speaker tonight, Mary Kaplan, is sharing her expertise from the Kaplan firm. Feel free to send in your questions and we will answer them during our Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. And now I'll hand it over to Mary.
Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's had a really great day today. I am here today to speak a little bit about aging in place. Just as a little background, I have been practicing estate planning, guardianship, probate, and elder law for over 20 years combined between Georgia and Florida. I'm licensed in both Florida and Georgia currently. And I am happy to talk to you a little bit about aging in place, which kind of relates to elder law. So without further ado, let's get started with our first slide. Okay, so planning is bringing the future into the present so you can do something about it now. So planning is very important in all stages of life, really, but especially as we age, so that we can plan, of course, to have enough funds to fund the lifestyle that we want to have, and hopefully have something left over to leave to family. But most importantly, to make sure that we're taken care of, that our needs are met as we age. And people, everyone knows people are living longer and longer, but the quality of life is something that we need to make sure that we still have as people live longer and longer than was expected even 20, 25 years ago. So let's think about some things that we plan for on an everyday basis. So we plan for vacations, where we're going to go in a few months' time, maybe next year. Dinner with friends in a week or two. We'll plan those dinners out, maybe even a month out, depending on the restaurant. Birthday parties. But do we plan for our future care the way that we should? Let's talk about that. So who among us will need care? And when I say care, I'm talking about as we age, what we call elder care. Most studies show that half of us, 1 in 2 people, will need some type of long-term care as they age. The type, frequency, and percentage of people who will need long-term care increases greatly once we reach age 70. The Department of Health and Human Services estimates that 70% of all people over the age of 65 will need some type of long-term care. And so, of course, we have to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia in general. And, I do have personal experience with this in my family. Alzheimer's increased by 46.1% as a cause of death between 2000 and 2006, while the other causes of death that we usually think of, like different types of cancers, heart disease, and HIV, all thankfully declined during that same time period. But that is quite an increase in the number of people who passed away due to Alzheimer's. Every 70 seconds, someone in America develops Alzheimer's. And 1 in 8 people over the age of 65 have Alzheimer's. That's a lot of people, especially when you think about the number of people in the country today who are over age 65. So when you have Alzheimer's or dementia, or just age-related decline, that usually triggers the need for someone to care for you, whether it's home-based caregivers coming into your home to offer care for you, whether it's you're moving into a assisted living facility or even a skilled nursing. These are things that come into play with those type of conditions. And of course, that care has to be paid for. The national average hourly rate for home healthcare aides is $21 an hour. And then let's talk specifically about Central Florida. In Central Florida, the cost of an assisted living facility averages approximately $5,000 a month, which is $60,000 a year. And a skilled nursing home in Central Florida averages $9,000 a month or $108,000 a year. And as we all know, that's a lot of money that can drain your assets that you worked your whole life for pretty quickly if you don't plan for it. So let's look at payment options. Let's give some thought to how this would be paid for. So you can pay with your own savings. that you worked hard and put away for the future, and you can drain all of that out pretty quickly. You could purchase long-term care insurance if you're lucky enough to be able to find long-term care insurance that you can afford the premiums on, because a lot of insurance companies don't underwrite those plans anymore because they were losing money on them. You can implement a legal plan to protect your home and your savings, or a combination of all of the above. And of course, I'm focused on the legal aspect of it because that's my job. So we'll talk a little bit more in general about that. And of course, what we want to avoid, things like running out of money, leaving your home unprotected, risking the health of family or spousal caregivers. This is a serious issue. And again, I know from my own family, taking care of someone with Alzheimer's or dementia is extremely difficult and a difficult job, especially on your spouse. If they're a well spouse and they're taking care of you, it's a 24-hour-a-day job. It's tough. It's tough mentally and it's tough physically. And of course, a lot of spouses feel that they have to do this, and they feel incredibly guilty if they turn this over to someone else or at least even ask for help. But they should not feel that way, because taking all this on themselves really, really subjects your spouse to far greater risk of serious health issues or even death due to just the physical, mental, and emotional toll that it can take. And I don't think that's what any of us want our spouses to be doing. So we want to avoid that. We want to have a plan in place that will avoid any of these issues arising. So let's talk about a specific example. So someone named Anne. She's 78 years old, and she recently lost her husband after he had a long battle with cancer. Her family wanted to make sure that she would be taken care of. Her 2 children live in different states, and they worry about her living alone. Very common story for my elderly clients who live in Florida, where they've got children that live in different states. Anne owns a home and approximately $225,000 in checking, savings, and CDs. She had a long-term care policy that she had been paying for the last 20 years, and it provided a daily benefit of $75. So let's look at her planning. Her aging in place plan was to keep the long-term care policy, place some of her liquid assets to the tune of $175,000 and her home into a family trust that her kids would oversee, and they could take the money out of it if they needed to. Keep another $50,000 in a revocable trust that Anne could use for whatever she wanted, whether it's home repairs, vacations, recreation, whatever she felt like, going and buying clothes, whatever it is that she wanted to do, and creating supercharged powers of attorney for health and financial decisions. So if she does this, as a result, if Anne's health would fail, she'll have the long-term care policy. She'll have her own funds that she set aside in the revocable trust, and her children will have the access to the family trust funds. So family trust, just as a very, very brief overview, is an irrevocable trust that we sometimes draft for people that are wanting to qualify for certain type of benefits like Medicaid or VA. So after 5 years at the most, all of the assets in that irrevocable family trust, so that again was $175,000, would be protected and would not be counted for Medicaid purposes if Anne ends up needing to go into some kind of a facility. If Anne becomes unable to make decisions for herself, then the people that she named as agents in her healthcare surrogate and her durable power of attorney for finances will be able to step in and make decisions on her behalf. So that kind of dealt with the Medicaid aspect of it. When we talked about the family trust, the assets that we put into that trust were set aside to enable Anne to qualify for Medicaid, because those assets were basically taken out of her name. They were taken out of accountability for Medicaid purposes so that she could qualify. Now, if her husband was a veteran, okay, let's talk about that scenario. If Anne was a surviving spouse of a wartime veteran, then she could be eligible for a cash payment of up to $1,094. These numbers, I think, are slightly off a little bit. This is kind of an older presentation, but you get the general idea. Her health would determine how much she would be eligible for. And then similar type of planning as we looked at in the earlier slide with the family trust and the revocable trust would need to be done in order to reduce her income and assets to an acceptable level to the VA standards. So it's similar. There's a little bit different considerations in planning for VA benefits, but it is kind of the same type of general idea that we're looking at assets, we're looking at income to try to work with the numbers to get Anne down below the thresholds so that she can qualify for these benefits. What if Anne herself was a veteran? If Anne had served during a wartime period and was discharged under conditions that were not dishonorable, so just regular normal discharge, she could be eligible for up to $1,703 from the VA. Again, I believe that number has been adjusted since this presentation. I can update this a little bit later with the exact numbers, and I'll do that. Similar planning would be done to get Anne's income and assets to an appropriate level. And then her health would determine how much she was eligible for monthly, because there's a medical component to this as well, based on what your needs are medically. So again, similar considerations. You have to kind of think about the person's monthly income and what their assets are. And there's planning that you can do to get people's income reduced and their assets reduced to a level where they can qualify for the benefits. Now, if Anne had done nothing and had done no planning, then her home and all of her liquid assets, which in this scenario was $225,000, could be consumed by the cost of the long-term care. Because as you recall, in Central Florida, assisted living costs are average $60,000 a year, and skilled nursing average cost is $108,000 a year. So that could very quickly, depending on how long Anne lives, of course, that could very quickly consume all of those assets that she had saved. Also, if she did not have a proper financial power of attorney, she could spend thousands, or her family could, setting up a guardianship for her. And the court would choose who makes decisions for her in that case. So a lot of people, there's been a lot of horror stories lately in the last year and a half in Florida about guardianship due to really one professional guardian in particular who wrongfully, took money and executed DNRs for people who didn't really need them. Although that is atypical. That's not typical at all. That was really just an isolated incident, but unfortunately that particular guardian had a lot of cases in Florida, so it impacted quite a few people. But at any rate, it is true that even if you have a good guardian, it does cost lots and lots of money, thousands of dollars to set up a court-supervised guardianship. And we do have to do those quite often for people who have not done any planning prior to becoming incapacitated. And what do I mean by that? Again, I mean, at the very, very least, planning, I'm referring to having at least a durable power of attorney that's validly executed and updated, and a healthcare surrogate. Those two documents are what you really need in order to have someone in place to make financial decisions for you if you ever become incapacitated and unable to make your own financial decisions, and to have someone in place to make medical and health related decisions for you if you're ever temporarily or permanently incapacitated. And if you don't have them, then your family might have to go to the court and get guardianship over you. And of course, there would be no funds in this scenario that her children could access to make sure she's getting the best care possible, and nothing would pass to her children when she passed away. There would be nothing left. Also, if Anne had done nothing, if she was a veteran or a surviving spouse of a veteran, she would have left thousands of dollars untapped, and her choices of care would be severely limited. Nursing home care might be her only choice. So what's the goal here? The overall goal in elder law planning is to age with dignity, to have access to the best care possible for you, not just, whatever is kind of left over for you to the last place you want to go is the worst type of care. The goal also is to take control over who will manage your finances if you cannot do so yourself, and under what circumstances. Also to take control over who will manage your health and medical decisions for you if you're not able to do so. Because again, if you don't do the proper planning and your family has to put a guardianship in place for you, then it's really up to the court and the judge to figure out who they're going to name as that guardian, who they're going to put in place to be in charge of your finances and be in charge of your health. And it may not be the person that you wanted. So I always make sure that not only do I always do durable powers of attorney and healthcare surrogates for all of my clients that come in that need planning, but also there's a document called Declaration Naming Pre-Need Guardian, where you can designate who should be your guardian if you ever need a guardianship. Typically, if you have durable powers of attorney and healthcare surrogates in place and they're done correctly, you won't need a guardianship. But even then, there can be circumstances where you do end up in a guardianship if, dire circumstances arise. What do I mean by that? So one example I can think of is we had a client who was writing checks to people that he would meet for 5 minutes on the street or just giving money out to people. He was giving his social security number to people, things like that. When you start to have dementia affecting your brain, you obviously, lose your judgment skills. You trust people you shouldn't trust. And you just don't have the judgment and insight that you used to have over your decision making. So even though that person did have a power of attorney and a healthcare surrogate, we still had to do a guardianship for him, because the only way to stop somebody from doing things like I stated in my example is to take guardianship over them, to really kind of take control back over what they're doing. So that's why I always do all of those documents to make sure all the possible, worst case scenarios are covered. And then finally, to leave the legacy that you choose, not what the state chooses for you. So again, if I've got clients who really feel a lot of pride in the fact that they've saved and they have a lot of savings, and they don't want to take what they think of as charity or something that's there just for like the very poorest of poor people. But on the other hand, the cost of care has really gotten out of control. It's so high, and it really has outpaced the rate of inflation by an extraordinary amount. So when you look at it that way, it's really not entirely what people were planning for when they first started saving, when they first started working, however many years ago that was. And if we want to have money and assets left to give to our children, this is probably the best way to do it, is to do some elder planning, sit down, figure out what your options are, how much of your own money that you've saved you can actually put away into a family trust that your children can have access to and can then set aside and not have those assets be counted for Medicaid or VA purposes. And then, of course, have some other assets that you keep control over so that you're not bankrupting yourself from day one. So you've got some assets that you have left in your name. And then eventually, if we need to do some sort of, if you need to move into a facility or have caregivers come in, you'll then qualify for some of these benefits that you would be eligible for. All right. So if you or a loved one would like to talk about how an aging in place plan would work for you, please give us a call. My phone number is right there. It's 407-494-6701. And I wish my email address was on here too. Maybe when we email out the presentation, I can include my email address in there. And you can also email me, but calling is great because one of my assistants can schedule you for an initial consult with me to talk about this. All my initial consults are free, and we do 1-hour consults. So please call. We can discuss what your options are. If you just decide you don't want to go forward, that's okay. It's free of charge. Usually, even if you don't want to do a full-fledged elder plan, there are documents and things that you do need to do kind of at a minimum to make sure that you don't end up in one of these situations where you don't have people in your family or friends, other loved ones in place to be able to make decisions for you in case of emergency. Okay. Thank you so much for your attention. I would be honored to work with you. So please give us a call if you have any questions or if you'd like to schedule a free consult. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. So we are going to take a brief pause so that you can send in your questions, and we will be back in just about 5 minutes.
Okay, so we are back. We had a few questions, which I appreciate all your questions. I'm going to try to answer all of them. So the first question we have is, does Addition Financial help to do a will in case something happened to me for the family? Just to clarify, I am kind of separate from Addition. I'm here because they asked me to do this presentation, but my firm is located near Dr. Phillips and Windermere, so on the west side of Orlando. I do have an additional office in Longwood that I visit once a week for my people that are on more the north side and the east side. We do all of our initial consults via Zoom ever since the pandemic, and it's really worked out well for a lot of clients because they don't have to drive to see me, at least not for the initial consult. And so it's pretty convenient that way. And as far as whether we do wills, yes, we do. Last wills and testament and revocable trust, which kind of sometimes go hand in hand. And I say revocable, kind of sounds like irrevocable, but it's two different things. But yes, we do wills, we do revocable trusts, living wills, healthcare surrogates, durable powers of attorney. We do the whole thing. And then we can also do a Medicaid analysis. So the way that it usually works as far as the process is that we'll meet. So I'll meet with you over Zoom and do an initial consult. And then if you want to go forward, we can do a Medicaid and VA analysis to see if you qualify, or see what your different options would be to try to get qualified for these type of benefits. And I can throw out some ideas and possibilities of type of things you could do to implement the plan. And then if you decide to implement the plan, then we charge a fee for that. And there's also a fee for the consult, but we will apply that towards the cost of implementation of the plan if you do decide to implement the plan later on. So we can help you with all of these things. I had another question that kind of related to it, where this person said, I have an irrevocable trust for my husband and myself. We are in charge of the trust. Would that cover us for Medicaid, or does someone else need to be in charge of the trust? That's a really good question. And I think a lot of people, because the words do sound so similar, kind of get irrevocable and revocable kind of twisted up. So most likely, I'm thinking what you might have is the revocable trust. Those are much more common. And with the revocable or revocable trust, that's the one that you can amend, modify, or revoke at any time. And that's the one where you would be the trustee of your own trust, meaning you're the one that would control, manage, and invest all the assets and do whatever you wanted with the assets. That, however, that type of trust does not qualify you for Medicaid. You would have to do an irrevocable trust, which I called family trust in my presentation. That is an irrevocable trust. And no, you cannot be in charge of that. You cannot be the trustee for that kind of trust. That's kind of the reason why in my presentation, the example was that you put some of your money aside into this irrevocable family trust, of which your children would be the trustees. And then you kept another amount of money in your revocable trust that you would have access to and be able to use as you wanted to. The money that was in the irrevocable family trust would be the money that would not be counted for Medicaid planning purposes because it becomes separate from you. It's not your money anymore, really. It's more under the control of your children, and it's kind of the amount that you're setting aside for them. And hopefully that didn't add confusion. This is a little bit complicated, but of course we can talk about it in more detail if you give me a call. Okay, I had another question. Spousal benefit for a veteran's wife. Is this a one-time benefit or is there a monthly benefit? There is a monthly benefit. It is not a one-time benefit. Of course, you do have to qualify medically for that. There has to be a certain amount of medical needs that you have in order to qualify for what's called aid in attendance, but it is monthly. Do I work with residents outside Florida? Now that depends on what you need. If you live outside Florida, but you own property here, then I can work with you on the property that's here. If you live outside Florida and you have parents maybe that live here that you want to help with their elder planning, then yes, of course, I can help with that. And of course, I'm certainly willing and able, especially nowadays with Zoom, to talk and meet with people outside the state of Florida about any of this. So yes, although primarily we focus on the assets that are located in this state. Let's see, what else do we have? And I do want to qualify that my office is in Orlando, kind of on the west side, but I do have an office in Longwood for people that are on the east or north side. And again, we would meet on Zoom. You would only have to physically come in once you had to sign the documents. So it would just be normally one time that you actually have to physically come in. I don't really discuss the cost. Someone asked me how much this all would cost. I don't like to throw the numbers out there because it does depend on the person's situation. Some people it's all different types of planning that people need, and it's all very individually customized. But again, my consults are free of charge. And so if the fees are too high for you or you don't want to do it, although my fees are very competitively priced, the initial consult is free. So you don't owe me anything if you decide that you don't want to go forward after that first meeting. Anything else? I think that's all the questions that we had. Again, I really appreciate everyone's time and attention. Thank you so much. And I hope that I can work with some of you in the future. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Mary. This concludes our presentation tonight. Check your inboxes tomorrow for an email containing a link to tonight's recording. And thank you all again for joining us. Have a great evening.